Hi everyone, Teri Wellbrock here. Today's guest, Luis Mojica. Wow. So you'll notice when you listen into this episode that he invites me to be a part of his 6-week course. And so I am on week 4 of it right now. We had done this interview back in June of 22, and it is now August of 22 that I'm putting this out here. So I did start his 6-week course, and let me just say it is everything that I needed, wanted, been looking for, and then some. I truly mean just mind-blowing in so many ways, in the information that is being given to us. But the sharing of stories by, I think there's maybe over 300 people in this particular course. The availability to ask questions, the community, it's part of, I think, Circle, and just the accessibility of information, but then also additional speakers coming in and sharing insights. There's one going on right now that I'm going to watch the recorded portion of it, because we can then go back and watch these hour and a half presentations. But then live demos go on and people volunteer. And so to witness this work being done is just amazing, because there's sometimes that they'll be doing something and Luis will ask the person who has volunteered something along the lines of, notice it in your body, and they'll say, oh, in my chest. And I'll have just thought to myself, oh, in my chest. And then one of the ones around food, it was in what do you, what's your addiction, or what, maybe not addiction, like what's your craving? And it was a cookie. And I had just thought, oh, I just stood in front of the pantry and thought, gosh, I really wish I could have a cookie. And so it's just very fascinating how yes, I can so relate as some of these demos are going on. But incredibly powerful interview, so much insight. I love this man's energy, and it's just a beautiful soul doing beautiful work. So one of my favorite interviews to date. So now for the show. Welcome, everybody, to the Healing Place podcast. I'm your host, Teri Wellbrock. I'm so excited to have with me today Luis Mojica, and he is somatic therapist and nutritionist and founder of Holistic Life Navigation. So welcome, Luis.
Thank you, Teri. Nice to be here with you.
Absolutely. I'm very excited to learn. I told you I've been on my own personal healing journey this past year with a physical mold toxicity, crazy as that is. We moved into a new house and had no idea of the history of this house, and it was filled with mold. So my body went, and went into a little bit of immune system overdrive. So that's where I am on my journey. So yeah, I'm excited personally to learn from you, but I also know the audience is wanting to hear about the work you're doing. So talk to us a little bit about your role. Like, what is Holistic Life Navigation?
Holistic life navigation is a kind of a form of therapy that I just invented, because I was trying so many different things. I was trying coaching. I went to school for psychotherapy. I was trying somatic healing. I was a nutritionist. There were all these different approaches, somatic experiencing in particular, that I loved. And I felt like they all needed to converse together instead of just focusing on one modality. So holistic life navigation was the kind of title I came up with for what I do, or what I practice, I should say. And it really combines nutrition, self-inquiry, and somatic experiencing, specifically to heal stress and trauma. It works for so many things, but stress and trauma tend to be the bulk of my work.
Beautiful. And I love it only because I love that idea of self-inquiry, that it's just such a really important part. And I've learned to do that now. So are you using meditation to then really tune into what your body's trying to tell you?
Exactly. When we think of common meditation, we think of, I shouldn't say common, but when a lot of people think of meditation, they think of emptying the brain, right? The mind, letting all the words float away. Or when you see thoughts coming, let them keep going, which is great. The kind of self inquiry that interests me is more of a somatic self inquiry, which is what you're touching in on. What does my body feel? Where do I feel it? What is it saying? And do I have a practice that supports me relating to those parts of myself? So I was studying and practicing self inquiry from the work of Byron Katie. I don't know if you ever heard of that.
Yes.
Yeah, and it totally changed my life because I learned that I'm not my thoughts, and thoughts have this sensational experience that completely changed how I live. So when I started having a way to notice my thinking and have a little space between identifying with the thinking and witnessing the thinking, I learned there was such a healing that took place when I was witnessing the thoughts. So I kind of ran that through the same lens of the somatic work. What if I witnessed the body instead of identified with the body? And it was mind blowing, what happened.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I still have these lingering bits of the trauma that we just haven't been able to tap into and through EMDR therapy and all these various modalities. And every now and then I test myself. I'll go do something that will normally be a trigger and starting to do that more and more. But I love what you just said of, yeah, and what was it again? Instead of identifying as the body,
Exactly, witnessing the body.
yeah,
Because then you
witness.
become this friend to your body. It's not like I'm no longer anxious. It's like some place inside of me is anxious. So if I feel anxiety in my chest, I get to witness, oh, my chest is holding anxiety. And if I witness that, I get to converse with that anxiety and kind of sit with it, learn what it's about, what it needs. If I identify with it, I lose all my agency of actually communicating and relating to it because I am the anxiety. Then I spin, or distract myself with social media or, whatever else I might do. It's a big difference when you witness versus identify.
Right. Fascinating. So now I
Yeah.
know for me personally, I have a response, a very we talked just a bit before hitting record, like the fawning part, but I have the like the instantaneous, want to run away and hide reaction. Is there a way to then kind of like pause that, stop that as you allow yourself to then, okay, hold up a second.
Yeah, this is a great question. So this is where a little education would come in first. You're speaking to trauma responses, and there's four general trauma responses. That's fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. You just spoke to two, which is flight and freeze. You want to run away and then hide, right? So that's like a flight freeze response, which a lot of people have. What's so fascinating about, again, witnessing the body instead of identifying with it is these trauma responses, they begin as low level sensation. So let's say I decide I'm going to go see a friend tonight. And just the thought of seeing the friend creates a dipping feeling in my stomach, like something kind of pulls down. There's like a heavy pressure. But I might not notice that if I'm over identified with my body or if I'm dissociated from it. I can't feel those sensations. So it's already telling me hours before the event, something doesn't feel right to me. So, but I don't hear it, let's say in this example. So I go about my day, that feeling kind of builds. I go to the event, and then the feeling builds into a full on, whether it's a panic attack or a trauma response, where there's so much charge in me. My body's trying to propel me away from what seemingly is threatening. And this is the trick of trauma. Trauma for the body, like a trauma response, can happen just by perceived threat. It doesn't have to be an actual life threat. So a lot of people think, well, no one hurt me, or it's just my friend, or it's just my mom. It's okay that I get nauseous whenever I talk to her. It's not the person themselves that's hurting you, it's how the body takes on the experience. So I always say trauma isn't the event, it's the response to the event. So when we're learning, like you said, the great word pause, when we're learning how to get in relationship with these trauma responses, what we're really doing is first we're learning how to witness them, which means the sensations of them before it turns into flight, before it turns into fawning. Well, what does it feel like before it actually full on flights or fawns? And then over time, you start to learn, oh, when my shoulders go up, that's my body's signal of saying you're going to freeze if you continue whatever it is you're doing. So I notice my shoulders going up, and then I might breathe into my shoulders. I might look around the room and show my body that right now nothing's happening. And just that little redirect will start releasing some of that adrenaline that would propel me into fight or flight. So it's a pause in terms of I stop and notice it and then I sit with it, and then it transforms and it doesn't turn into a full-blown trauma response.
Oh my gosh, thank you for that, because I was I was taking it a step further in getting to the place of triggering and
Yeah,
then
yeah,
saying, okay, Teri, now you need to sit with it. You have to allow it. And instead
yeah.
my body was like, no.
Yes. I love that example because you're giving a great example of like immersion therapy, where you take yourself to the point of trigger, which I totally respect. I've done the same thing just to kind of test, is my body over this or not? And if we just think, and anyone listening can try this right now with us, if we just think of something that triggers us, you will immediately feel a sensation being triggered. You'll feel a tension in the chest. You'll feel like a clenching in your gut. You'll notice, oh, my hands are like on fire, or my body wants to shake. So you don't even have to go and do it. You can just think of it and it shows you if it's still alive inside of you. And then you get to build some capacity, relate to it, take your time with it instead of push it beyond its boundary. Because that no is it's a boundary and we want to respect that until it transforms.
Right. And I love that idea of transforming it as well. And totally, as you were talking, and I was envisioning myself taking myself to that place, my stomach's just flipping. Butterflies, the
Yes.
butterflies were a flopping. And so, yeah.
Yes.
So then that
Yes.
would be what I would want to sit with right now and be like,
Yes.
okay, so let's find. Now, do you recommend people journal on it? They meditate? What are there different options? What works for each individual?
What I love is I'm not against journaling at all, actually. The thing that's cool about somatics, the more you practice and learn about them, like somatic psychology, somatic experiencing is what I'm trained in, you start to learn that the body is just doing it already, and it just needs the mind to get out of the way. And then the mind, or the consciousness, even more than the mind, becomes kind of the guide or the support system to the body that already wants to release it. So journaling can be really helpful for some people, and it can still over identify us. What I love about your example of, I think about it right now, like are you in an office right now?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So you're in your office, you think about the triggering event, you feel the stomach flipping. This is where we would want to invoke the event before we're there, feel the sensations, and then we can actually relate to our space. So if you just right now, if you want to try this with me,
Sure.
just slowly look around the room, like slower than seems natural. And any of you listening can follow us. Yeah, just like I just slowly turn your head over your one shoulder and look around and look up. And as we look around, we're looking at our actual environment, noticing, what do I like here? What's pleasant? What does my body feel in response to this space? And tell us what you notice. What do you feel as you look around?
I just keep like smiles keep popping up
Yeah,
because I'm like, oh, that memory of that person that gave me that heart, and oh, look, there's the state of Ohio where I moved from. So I mean, I obviously surround myself with beautiful, inspiring things, but so yes, I was feeling and my stomach's not flipping as much.
that's right. So what's really cool about this is you're teaching us through your body what I love to talk about, which is attunement. And so when you think about that thing you're going to do that triggers you, you feel the trigger, good, you want to know it's there. And then you attune to the space you're in, and that space becomes a resource. It creates an expansion in us, lowers our adrenaline, like your smile came up. So this kind of vitality enters, which becomes a medicine to actually then sit with what's flipping in the gut. So it's a beautiful practice of actually finding our safety while simultaneously relating to and going into the trigger rather than the actually going into the event itself, right? Just we use the sensation, not even the event. And then there's so much, I mean, there's so many options once you start. Like this is how we'd begin a session. You know, we'd resource the body, feel the safety of the present experience. And then that's an anchor to sensationally go into the butterflies in the gut. And then we might do self-inquiry. You might notice, what are the butterflies in the gut saying to you? What's the lineage of the butterflies in the gut? How far back in your lifetime, or even in your parents' or grandparents' lifetime, is this a trigger in the family, this kind of dynamic? You know, what need pops up? Like so much information comes through the sensation. Yet a lot of us don't get to that level because we lose our present safety. And then we get overwhelmed by the sensation. And then we cope. We go into binge eating or with withholding food, or we watch a ton of television, or we reflexively call somebody. We distract distract ourselves unconsciously from that feeling, like the butterflies in this case. However, if we have the safety and we pause into it, we don't need a distraction because we feel safe and we feel the trauma response. It's like a double experience, which is really fascinating and effective at actually being able to be with the discomfort, if that makes sense.
Yeah, oh gosh, you've just blowing my mind away because and I feel like it's a little therapy session going on because as you talked, 2-year-old me popped into my head. And so there was 2-year-old me. So I was like, oh, I got to go back to 2. So,
Yes,
but I was
yes.
right there in that high chair as 2-year-old me. So,
That's what's
oh,
fascinating is the body just shows it to you. Like you don't have to go to therapy and figure out what am I going to talk about. If you go to somatic therapy, you go, okay, what does my body want to talk about? And you notice the butterflies, just like you did, you let them show you something and they'll show you an image connected to that sensation. So it's fascinating. Like it blows my mind every time.
yes. Oh, you're blowing my mind right now. And this is amazing. Oh my gosh. I love it. I love it. I love it. Um, so yeah, at that point, I'm just sitting here so amazed that I didn't even have another question pop into my head. Normally I'll have one pop in, but
Fine with me. We can sit in the amazement together.
oh my gosh, it's so awesome. Well, one of the other things I think we had to make a little left turn was talking about, were you actually, it's not so much of a left turn because we had talked about the 4 different responses. Can you talk a little bit about fawning? We haven't talked about that a whole lot on the show.
Mm. I love talking about fawning. I can't talk about fawning enough. Fawning is the most least talked about trauma response. That's why I love talking about it. And I did it my whole life. So I have like a personal attachment to it. It's fascinating. So it's this trauma response where the body reflexively, rewind, every trauma response we have is automatic. That's the most important thing for everyone listening. They're automatic, reflexive, autonomic responses. So the same way we sneeze and we can't control that when a pollen or something goes into our nose, trauma response is the same thing for the nervous system. The nervous system reflexively fight, flights, freeze, or fawns when it feels like it's in danger or overwhelmed. Fawning is a strategy the body uses to appease the threat. So if the person in front of you is an actual life threat, or again, an overwhelm that feels threatening or feels overwhelming, too much to handle, the body will reflexively socially engage with that person, smile when it doesn't want to, when you don't want to smile, laugh when nothing's funny, nod, say yes, like all these things that we do just not even knowing that we're connecting to the person, physiologically or with our gestures, because the body has learned in the past and from our parents and such, like through our own bloodlines, this is one way we get to survive situations with people who could be dangerous. And it goes really far back. I mean, if we go into a primitive place here, if you're face to face with someone who might take your life and you're able to befriend that person or charm them or make them feel good, it relaxes their body and you might be able to escape. You might be able to mobilize into a flight response then. So fawning is actually it's ancient, and it's a way that we try to appease the other person that might be hurting us. I find it so important to talk about because there's so much nuance and misunderstanding with sexual trauma, where a
Mm.
lot of people will have sexual trauma, but they can't necessarily call it rape. They can't necessarily call it assault because it wasn't violent, let's say, or there wasn't force. They went along with it. And this even happens in marriages. I've had people married for decades together. The safe marriage, like loving each other, consensual intimacy and everything, yet the person's body is so conditioned to fawning that it says yes even to their partner they love when they don't feel it. So over the years, this constant unconscious boundary violation creates a trauma, and you can have sexual trauma without actual violation because you were fawning and you thought you wanted it, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So, I know it's like a deep turn, but I think it's an important thing to bring up because so many people are like, why do I have all this sexual trauma, but I can't find an event of violence? This is a big reason why.
Wow. That's one of those mind-blowing aha moments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the amount of people I have found that understand fawning or learn about it and then start understanding sexual fawning, which is what I'm speaking to here, it immediately starts to release this shame and this guilt and this confusion because they start to understand Oh, yes. I didn't actually want that, but I wanted to make them happy, right? Or I didn't really want that, but I really wanted a second date, so I went along with it. And this is not gender based. We have this idea that only women do this. Everyone does this in different ways. And again, the sexual trauma is very present as a result.
Wow. And one of my hashtags I use quite often, as you were speaking, is trauma survivor, or I'm sorry, trauma warrior. And what I think about is, wow, trauma survivors are really pretty smart when it comes to survival, because I know I've utilized all four of the different. I have my go-to, which is the freeze is my
Yeah.
go-to, but I think, oh, I've done fawning for sure. So it's almost like sizing up the situation, right?
That's exactly what happens. And it's so important as well to disidentify the person from the trauma response. Like I'm not sizing up the person, my body is. Because when we're in the trauma response, we're dissociated. No one
Right.
is consciously like, I'm laughing when I don't want to. In hindsight, they say, why did I just laugh? Right? Because they weren't in their bodies. Because when a trauma response actually is happening, the nervous system takes over and our ability to even think and feel it kind of goes into the back. So, what's really interesting there is the nervous system is constantly sizing it up and it will say, okay, this person's smaller than me. I can fight them. This person's far away. I can run away. I can flight. I can't get away from this person. I'm gonna have to freeze. Or this person seems like someone I could really charm and attract. I'm gonna work them a little bit. And the nervous system is doing all this. We're not like consciously choosing it. So it's always good just to remind ourselves how what a mechanism this is. Like we're born with it for survival. Animals have it. We think of a cat who turns on its back and shows you its belly. That's a fawning response. Like, I'm here for you, touch me, I won't hurt you. So, we do this to live and survive on the planet. But yes, sizing up based on the experience and whatever the threat is, the body decides like in a nanosecond which trauma response to mobilize into.
Wow. You're blowing my mind here. Again, I'm so fascinated by the whole fact that really the trauma response is a good thing.
Yes, thank you. That's the piece. It's
Yes.
such a good thing. What happens is there's these three kind of stages I put it in, so it makes it really simple. There's the stimulus, which is the possible or actual threat. There's the trauma response, which is the body's automatic response to save you or survive the threat. And then there's the regulation period, where the body says, we survived. And then the eyes look around, and maybe you get a hug, or maybe you settle down, you breathe deeply. That's the step we don't enter into when we have PTSD. So the trauma response is beautiful because it's meant to be temporary. Where it becomes harmful is when it becomes a permanent baseline of our lives. So we're living in this baseline of flight, always ready to take off, always looking for threat. That looks like insomnia. That looks like overscheduling yourself. That looks like talking really fast. Looks like a sewing machine leg or
Oh, yeah.
sewing pedal leg is right. And so it looks like all these things because the body is actually stuck in flight. That's what hurts us. So yeah, trauma response is very good. We need them for survival. They're why we're here talking. Staying in a trauma response, developing in a trauma response, that's what creates imbalance.
Yes, absolutely. And then for someone who's in chronic trauma, I mean, acute trauma can have this impact, but then to have chronic trauma as well, it's just a constant state of living in that.
That's exactly right. And we have this term called overcoupling, which essentially means like an association. So when you're in a chronic traumatic state, so this is especially childhood developmental trauma, when the events are every day or several times a week or even several times a year, something that's just consistent throughout the developing nervous system, the body overcouples these responses with survival. So the body decides we're just going to stay constricted because history tells us this is just going to keep happening. So even when we reach our 20s, 30s, 40s, and we're really far from these events that have, really hurt us as children, that were actually threats, we could be 50 years from them. Our bodies are still saying it's going to happen tomorrow. So the body gets in this kind of habit, let's say, or this belief system of expecting threat. So it's always looking for threat. And the mind, sometimes it shows up through our thoughts, because we might have extremely stressful thoughts when something beautiful is happening. Might lay down and, oh, it feels so good to lay in this bed. What if I left the candle on? What if this person's dying right now? What if my car is going to explode? All these things that our mind goes into, because it's trying to keep us constricted, because the body's overcoupled that with safety. So chronic developmental trauma, it's even a deeper overcoupling of thinking we have to stay hypervigilant for survival. Absolutely.
Yeah. But doing somatic work and allowing yourself to recognize the symptoms and so forth, it can release that. Yes.
Oh my gosh, that's why I got into this work, because I couldn't find anyone who could help me with my PTSD. I went from therapist to therapist to therapist, and they helped me uncover more of my blacked out memories, but I didn't release them. Every time I found a new memory or had a new title or had more of an understanding, even of what happened, I would feel more PTSD symptoms. I wasn't feeling a relief, and I couldn't, it was so frustrating. So I was going from one therapist to the other. I was wondering, why do I have more insomnia? Why am I binging again? Like, why am I terrified to leave the house? Like, what's happening in my body? And I just by chance found a somatic therapist someone referred me to. And I sat in her office, and I remember her saying, she paused me as I was telling her a story in childhood. I was like, this one day, doctor, she said, stop right there. What are you feeling? And it was the first time a therapist stopped me mid-sentence and said, where do you feel what you're saying? And she helped me in that moment notice, oh, my body is holding these events. They're not just events in my mind. And when I talk about them, they vanish. They're in my body. And then it was this life-changing moment of, if it's in my body, I can actually relate to it. I can hold it. I can listen to it. I can guide it. I don't need to go back there even. I get to be with what's present, which is they're still reverberating in me. And then after, over time, slowly started to release, because these parts of me that felt they had to stay constricted and adrenalized started noticing, wait, it's 20 years later. Let's feel what this room feels like now, right? Let's feel what this body feels like now. Like, so much is different now. And it's not a mind thing, it's a sensational thing. So the nervous system literally starts to update and says, whoa, I survived. I never felt my survival. Like, I know it. People tell me, right? Like, people might say you're my title was a survivor of childhood sexual assault. That was my title.
Mm.
And so I kept thinking, oh, I survived it. Like, why am I not getting better? I didn't feel my survival yet. Right. And then when I started feeling it, I was like, oh my goodness, this feels so good. I survived. And then the nervous system just completely releases what it's holding. And you get to this new state of safety.
Oh, Luis, you're giving me goosebumps. My eyes welled with tears. It's awesome. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Yeah, you have me. I'm ready to sign up. I still do EMDR therapy. I started back to it after with this physical journey. And I thought I have to take care of my mental health. And we do, like, we keep again, like, oh, we need to uncover this one. And, like the onion, just slowly peeling it back, peeling it back, peeling it back. But we keep talking about, my thing is open spaces. And so I'll say, and I live on this gorgeous island, Hilton Head Island, and I love the beach. But when I get out there, the other day I said, oh, I'm going to test myself. My family was already out there. And so I was walking along, and it's a pretty little hike. I grabbed onto a pole that had like dog poop bags on it. And I was like, I have to run back. And so I was like running back. People around me were probably like, crazy lady, like, what is happening? But once I got back to the little boardwalk, I was like, okay, I'm now safe.
Yeah.
Okay. So now
Yeah.
I'm like so curious about doing somatic work on that.
Well, what's really cool about that example, and one thing I talk about a lot with these overcouplings, is when you have PTSD, especially when it's childhood developmental, but it can be acute as well, like you mentioned, the body says, again, constriction is what keeps me safe. Expansion is really dangerous. So when you're in these wide open spaces, even if there isn't a specific memory with a wide open space, just the feeling of being able to be open and unprotected can feel dangerous to the body. And then that I need to run back somewhere where I feel much more like huddled in, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So it's like your work is literally to teach your nervous system that it's safe to expand, but really slowly. really slowly. I would love to invite you to my 6 week course. I'd love to just give that to you as a gift
Oh,
because
that's so sweet.
because
Oh
the
my,
work that you do is, I think it'd be
yes.
great for you to try, whenever you feel ready.
Yes. Oh, so I'm so excited. I swear, when we were done recording, I was going to be like, "How do I sign up with you? What do I do?" Because again, I love the idea of trying so many different modalities. Just when you were speaking a minute ago, and mindfulness practice and using the senses to be very aware of being in the present moment and very much in the now, and that's been a huge help for me along my journey and many others, and we talk about it on the show. So yeah, so coming across something again, I think it just comes to us as a gift when God,
Mm.
the universe, whatever it is, like we're ready to accept it. And so this is just beautiful, beautiful
I
work.
completely agree. And I often say that for me, trauma response is actually life force from God. Like I really believe it's this energy that's much bigger than us that moves through us and pushes us into a survival, like gets us out of a situation that would kill us. But our little human nervous systems aren't built to hold all that forever. That's why it's supposed to be temporary. So when they're holding that for decades, we have chronic health illnesses, and then experiences and expressions. So trauma is a very, very sacred thing for me. I don't see it as a negative. I see it as a absolute necessity for survival. We just have become trauma disinformed in our societies in the last several hundred years. So learning again how to relate to the trauma and feel it and speak to it, it's a whole new lifestyle then.
Oh, for sure. I mean, trauma events, they happen, whether it's
That's right.
death of a loved one or an accident or an illness, whatever it is. I mean, it's just life happens.
Life
And
happens,
so
yeah.
you're right. Like we need to be able to look at our responses then as a gift. And
Hmm.
right.
Yeah,
And
that's
then
right. The
getting,
only thing missing is our response to the response.
yeah.
That's the piece we haven't learned. But life is inherently traumatic. Like it just is. It's a predictable future for us all that we're going to experience more trauma. However, we don't have to become traumatized. That's when the trauma is
Yes.
just frozen in us. We can experience it and then move through it. And these practices, they teach us how to do that.
Oh, that's exactly the most beautiful point yet, is that we don't have to be traumatized by it. Yes, it's an event that is defined as trauma, but we don't have to allow it. Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Wonderful. All right. So is there anything else? I'm just looking at our time real quick, seeing how we're doing. Wow. We could sit here and talk for a few more hours.
We could. We definitely could.
Is there anything else that you wanted to address that we hadn't had an opportunity to talk about?
No, I think this is great. I think anyone listening, my favorite thing about somatic work is you can do it right now. You can feel what's coming up as Teri and I speak. You can notice what's your body showing you. You can even feel, ooh, is there a thirst for this? Do I resonate or do I not? That's what I love about somatic work is it gives you your body back. It's not a product. It's not like a thing you have to go to a specialist for. Specialists will teach you. They're really good guides, but over time it's your body that you're always with, so you get to learn how to do this. So it's so accessible and it's so empowering, and that's just what I love about it.
Wonderful. So how do people connect with you? How do they find you?
So what I do now is I offer a 6 week course 3 to 4 times a year, and the course is amazing. It's like I don't even know how to explain it. It's transformed so much since I started it. I have this incredible team of people. I have a somatic therapist in training that offers one-on-one sessions for people who want to go deeper as they do the work with us. We meet 3 times a week. We have an online platform where people can share however they're feeling. They can direct message me if they're shy or they feel like it's private, they don't want to share publicly. But we learn so much from how to relate to these trauma responses. We learn how nutrition increases or decreases trauma response. We learn what herbal infusions to drink that will help our nervous systems and adrenals repair. We learn how to relate to people in ways that feel healthier for us. There's so much in the 6 weeks. And there's audio exercises and there's just so much support. And it's a global community. So it's all these people from all around the world who are coming to listen to their bodies with other people. and it's incredibly unifying. So that's the only way to work with me right now. I'm retiring from private practice. That's what I did for a while. And the group work feels so much better for me because it's financially more accessible for others. And something about being in a space where everyone's kind of on that same journey and they're witnessing each other, it's so much more sustainable than how I was working before with individuals, specifically with the kind of work I do, specifically with the work the way I do my work.
Right.
So yeah, the 6 week course is the best way. I also have a podcast that anyone can listen to and just kind of feel into the practices even instead of or before they do the course. And then we have a
Awesome.
membership for people who take the course who want to
And is
do
that
weekly work.
on a website? Is that on your website?
Oh yeah, sorry. Everything's on
That's okay.
holisticlifenavigation.com. Everything's there.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, again, I'm so excited. It's just been such a joy to have you here, and thank you for the beautiful light you shine out into the world and the work you're doing.
Oh, you too. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, everyone, thanks for joining us today on the Healing Place podcast. And remember, until next time, be gentle with yourself. Thanks. Bye-bye. Hey, everybody. Teri Wellbrock again. Just wanted to thank you for listening to the episode today and remind you to visit my website as well as the academy.teriwellbrock.com for the courses. But if you go to my website, teriwellbrock.com, you can sign up for my monthly Hope for Healing newsletter, which is also jam-packed with information and strategies and blog pieces and guest blog pieces and links to shows. And just a great space for, again, healing and hope. Thanks for, again, being here and being a part of this healing space. I very much appreciate you. All right. Bye-bye.